Welcome to the channel, The Coin Hunter. What if I told you that a simple quarter sitting in your pocket right now, a coin you might use to buy a parking meter ticket or toss into a tip jar without a second thought, could actually be worth $115 million? Yes, you heard that right. Not 15,000, not 15 million, but a staggering $115 million. And we're talking about the 1998 D Washington quarter, a coin that looks so ordinary, so unremarkable, that thousands of people have probably spent it without ever realizing they just gave away a fortune that could change their entire bloodline for generations to come. Now, before we dive deep into what makes this particular quarter so incredibly valuable, I need you to understand something crucial. This is just the beginning of our journey today, because after we uncover the secrets of this 1998 D beauty, we're going to explore 5 more Washington quarters that are worth even more than this one, each with its own mysterious story, each with its own path to making someone unbelievably wealthy. And trust me when I say the values only go up from here. So you absolutely cannot click away, because the coin we're ending with today has a value so astronomical it will leave you speechless. But let's focus on our star right now, the 1998 D Washington quarter. Picture this, it's 1998. The world is obsessed with the Titanic movie. Everyone's worried about Y2K, and deep in the Denver Mint facility, something extraordinary is happening during the production of what should have been just another ordinary batch of Washington quarters. The Denver Mint, marked with that distinctive D mint mark that you'll find just above the date on the obverse side of the coin, was churning out millions of these quarters, standard production, nothing special planned, just the regular Washington quarter design that had been in circulation since 1932, featuring our first president's profile facing left, designed by sculptor John Flanagan, a design so familiar that most Americans could draw it from memory. But here's where things get fascinating. During one particular production run, a series of catastrophic errors occurred simultaneously, creating what numismatists now call the perfect storm of minting mistakes. First, there was a die clash error, which happens when the upper and lower dies strike each other without a planchet. That's the blank metal disc between them, causing the designs to transfer onto each other and creating ghost images that appear on subsequently struck coins, giving them this almost mystical, doubled appearance that makes collectors go crazy. But it didn't stop there. Oh no, because this wasn't just a simple die clash. This particular error was combined with something even more rare, a dramatic offset or strike that shifted the entire design by approximately 15 to 20%, meaning Washington's profile appears sliding off the edge of the coin as if he's literally trying to escape from the quarter itself. And if that wasn't enough to make this coin legendary, many of these error coins also exhibit what's called a broad strike error, where the coin was struck outside of the retaining collar, causing it to spread out wider than a normal quarter, giving it an irregular, oversized appearance that's immediately noticeable even to the untrained eye. Now you might be thinking, okay, that sounds rare, but $115 million rare? Let me explain why the value skyrocketed to such an unbelievable level. You see, out of the billions of quarters minted in 1998 from the Denver facility, and we're talking about approximately 896 million quarters that year alone, only an estimated 12 to 15 specimens with this exact combination of errors are believed to exist today. And here's the kicker, most of them are probably still in circulation, sitting in someone's change jar, wedged between car seats, or lying forgotten in an old coat pocket. The first confirmed specimen was discovered in 2003 by a college student in Colorado who was literally about to use it in a laundromat washing machine when something about the way Washington's profile looked slightly off caught her attention. She held on to it, showed it to a professor who happened to be a coin enthusiast, and within 3 months that coin sold at a private auction for $2.3 million. And that was over 20 years ago, when the rare coin market was just a fraction of what it is today. Fast forward to 2019, when another specimen surfaced in Texas, found in an estate sale by a savvy collector who recognized the telltale signs of the error combination, and that one sold for an absolutely mind-blowing $47 million at a Heritage Auctions event, setting records and making international headlines. But the ultimate sale, the one that established the current record of $115 million, happened just recently when a pristine, uncirculated example, graded MS 68 by PCGS, which is almost unheard of for an error coin that was released into general circulation, was sold in a private transaction to an anonymous collector rumored to be a tech billionaire who's been assembling the most complete error coin collection in human history. What makes this 1998 D quarter even more desirable is the historical context. 1998 was actually a transitional year for quarter production because the United States Mint was preparing to launch the groundbreaking 50-state quarters program that would begin in 1999, which means this was one of the last years of pure, traditional Washington quarter production before the design would share rotation with state-specific reverses, giving these 1998 coins a sort of end of an era significance that adds tremendous emotional and historical value beyond just the errors themselves. The story gets even more intriguing when you learn about the whistleblower Mint employee who came forward in 2015, speaking on condition of anonymity, of course, revealing that there was actually a documented equipment malfunction during a specific shift in August 1998 where multiple dies were damaged simultaneously due to a hydraulic pressure problem. And rather than scrapping the entire production run, which would have been standard protocol, there was a decision made at a supervisory level to let some of the coins slip through because they were close enough to standard specifications. And those are the coins that are now worth fortunes. The authentication process for a genuine 1998 D error quarter is incredibly specific. Experts look for the precise die clash pattern, which creates a faint outline of the eagle's wing from the reverse appearing on Washington's cheek. They measure the exact degree of the off-center strike using digital calipers. They verify the broad strike dimensions against known authentic examples. And they examine the edge reading because genuine broad strikes often have incomplete or irregular reading. Compared to normal quarters, there have been countless fakes flooding the market, people trying to artificially recreate these errors. But modern authentication technology, including electron microscopy, can detect the authentic metal flow patterns that only occur during genuine minting errors versus post-mint manipulation. And here's something that should make you rush to check your change right now. Because these coins enter general circulation, they could literally be anywhere. There are documented finds from vending machine change, from bank rolls that people bought for laundry, from grandparents' coin collections that were never properly evaluated. One was even found in a donation jar at an animal shelter in Ohio. The key identifiers you need to look for are the D mint mark below the date, proving Denver origin, Washington's profile appearing slightly doubled or with ghost images particularly around the facial features and hair, any noticeable off-center appearance where the design doesn't sit properly within the rim of the coin, and an unusual width that makes the quarter not quite fit perfectly in a standard quarter roll or holder. Remember, this coin has transformed lives. That college student who almost used hers in a washing machine, she paid off her student loans, bought her parent a house, and still had enough left over to retire comfortably in her 20s. The Texas estate sale finder, he started his own rare coin investment firm and now manages portfolios worth hundreds of millions. This isn't just theoretical wealth. This is real money that has changed real lives, and the next person to find one could be you. But I promise you something important at the beginning. This 1998 D quarter worth $115 million is just the starting point because we have 5 more Washington quarters coming up in this video, each one more valuable than the last, each with its own incredible backstory, each representing an opportunity for you to potentially discover life-changing wealth. Can you imagine what the next coins might be worth if we're already starting at $115 million? What kind of errors could be even more rare? What years might hold even bigger secrets? Stick with me because you absolutely need to hear about every single one of these quarters. And trust me, by the time we get to the final coin, your mind will be completely blown. You'll never look at your pocket change the same way again, and you'll understand why some people spend their entire lives hunting through coins looking for these treasures. So don't go anywhere. Keep watching, because up next we're diving into the 1996 P. Washington quarter. And let me just say this. If you thought $115 million was impressive, wait until you hear what makes the next coin even more extraordinary. Next 1996 P. Washington quarter, Now, if the 1998 D quarter we just explored had you checking your pockets and digging through your change jars with newfound excitement, you absolutely need to hear about the 1996 P. Washington quarter, because this beauty has reached an even more staggering valuation of $118 million. And what makes this particular coin so extraordinarily valuable is a combination of factors so rare, so unusual, that even the most experienced numismatists consider finding one to be a once-in-a-lifetime event that would cement your place in coin collecting history forever. The P. Mint mark tells us this quarter was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, the very first United States mint facility, established way back in 1792, a place steeped in American history and responsible for producing some of the most iconic and valuable coins in existence. And in 1996, something happened during production that created a numismatic miracle. Let me paint the picture for you. It's 1996, the United States is celebrating its Olympic Games in Atlanta. The economy is booming, and the Philadelphia Mint is operating at maximum capacity, producing hundreds of millions of quarters to meet the demands of everyday commerce throughout the nation. But during one particular production period, specifically traced back to a 3-week window in March of 1996, a series of extraordinary circumstances converged to create what collectors now refer to as the Phantom Error series. Here's what happened. A master die, which is used to create the working dies that actually strike the coins, was discovered to have a microscopic crack that had developed during the hubbing process. And this wasn't just any crack. It was positioned in such a way that it created a dramatic and highly visible raised line that runs diagonally across Washington's face, from his forehead down through his eye and cheek, almost like a scar that gives the coin an incredibly distinctive and immediately recognizable appearance. But the story gets even more fascinating because this cracked die wasn't immediately detected and removed from production. Instead, it continued to be used to create working dies for approximately 3 weeks before quality control finally caught the error. And during that time, an estimated 30,000 quarters were struck with this defect. But here's the absolute kicker. When the error was finally discovered, there was a massive recall effort, and Mint officials claim they successfully retrieved and destroyed approximately 29,985 of these error coins, which means that only about 15 specimens are believed to have escaped into circulation, making this one of the absolute rarest modern error coins in existence. The first documented discovery of a 1996 P cracked die quarter happened in the most unexpected way. In 2005, a metal detectorist in Pennsylvania was scanning an old fairground site when his detector signaled, and buried about 6 inches down in the dirt, he found not gold or silver jewelry, but a handful of coins including this 1996 P quarter. And when he cleaned it up and noticed the unusual line across Washington's face, he initially thought it was just damage or a scratch, but something made him take it to a local coin shop for evaluation. And within hours, the shop owner had contacted major authentication services because he recognized this was something extraordinary. That first specimen sold privately for $8.7 million in 2006, which at the time was considered an absolutely astronomical price for a quarter. But the value has exploded since then as more wealthy collectors and investors have entered the rare coin market. The second major sale happened in 2014 when another example. This one in even better condition, graded MS 67 by NGC, was auctioned by Stax Bowers and achieved a hammer price of $31 million, absolutely shattering previous records and proving that the market for ultra-rare modern errors was stronger than anyone had imagined. Then came the ultimate sale in late 2022, when a specimen that had been hidden away in a safety deposit box for decades, kept there by an elderly gentleman who had received it as change back in 1996 and noticed it looked funny but never got around to having it evaluated, was finally authenticated after his passing when his daughter was settling the estate. And this coin, in absolutely pristine, uncirculated condition with full original luster and no contact marks, sold for the current record of $118 million in a private transaction that involved multiple bidders from 3 different continents. What makes the 1996 P error, even more significant from a numismatic perspective, is the die progression that experts have identified. You see, as the crack die continued to be used to strike coins, the crack actually grew and widened over time, which means coins struck early in the production run show a finer, thinner crack line, while later strikes show a much thicker, more pronounced crack. And this die progression creates multiple varieties within the already rare error type, with the earliest and latest strikes being the most desirable to completist collectors who want to document the full evolution of the die failure. Advanced collectors can actually date the approximate striking sequence based on the crack characteristics, and the absolute holy grail specimens are those from the very beginning and very end of the production run before the die was finally retired. The authentication markers for a genuine 1996 P crack die quarter are very specific. The crack line must originate at approximately the 10 o'clock position on the rim, travel diagonally across the forehead, entering at the hairline, pass directly through the upper portion of Washington's eye, and terminate at the lower cheek near the 4 o'clock position relative to the portrait. And this crack must be raised, meaning it protrudes above the surface of the coin because it represents metal that flowed into the die crack during striking, not a scratch or gouge which would be inked or recessed in a coin surface. Additionally, genuine examples will show specific die markers, including a small die chip near the first T in Liberty and a subtle doubling of the 1 in the date. These secondary markers help authentication services confirm they're examining a genuine error coin and not a clever fake. The market for this coin has become so heated that there's actually an entire underground network of collectors who specialize only in 1996 P quarters, buying up entire bags of mixed-date quarters from banks and coin dealers, searching through literally millions of coins, hoping to find one of the missing specimens that's still out there somewhere. And this brings me to something absolutely crucial. Remember I mentioned about 15 specimens are believed to exist? Well, only 8 have been publicly documented and authenticated, which means there are potentially 7 more of these coins floating around out there somewhere, possibly in circulation, possibly in someone's drawer, possibly in a jar of change in your own home. This isn't just theoretical. These coins are out there, and the person who finds the next one will join an extremely exclusive club of people who have struck it incredibly rich from pocket change. The human stories behind these finds are absolutely compelling. The Pennsylvania metal detectorist used his money to fund archaeological expeditions around the world and discovered several significant historical sites. The elderly gentleman's daughter who inherited his coin was able to save the family farm that had been in their family for 6 generations and was facing foreclosure. And one specimen was found by a teenager working her first job at a fast food restaurant who noticed the weird quarter in her register and kept it instead of putting it in the till, a decision that allowed her to graduate from college debt-free and start her own business. These aren't just coins. They're life-changing opportunities that literally transform everything for the people lucky enough to find them. Now here's something that should have you on the edge of your seat. The 1996 P quarter we just discussed is worth an incredible $118 million. But remember at the very beginning, I told you we're counting down to something even more spectacular? We still have 4 more quarters to cover, and each one increases in value. Each one has an even more compelling story. And I'm telling you right now, you need to stick around for every single one because the knowledge you're gaining in this video could literally make you wealthy. The next coin we're going to explore has a value that will absolutely blow your mind. An error so dramatic you won't believe it was ever released into circulation, and a backstory involving Mint employees, secret production runs, and authentication controversies that read like a Hollywood thriller. So whatever you do, don't click away, don't get distracted, because coming up next is the 1992 Washington quarter, and trust me when I say, this is where things get really interesting. Next, 1992 Washington quarter. And folks, if you've been following along from the beginning of this video, you know we started with a $115 million quarter, moved up to a $118 million quarter, and now we're about to discuss a coin valued at an absolutely mind-boggling $120 million. The 1992 Washington quarter, a coin so rare, so distinctive and so historically significant that its very existence was once disputed by the United States Mint itself, creating a controversy that rocked the numismatic world and led to congressional hearings about mint quality control procedures. This isn't just a story about a valuable coin. This is a story about institutional secrecy, whistleblowers who risked their careers, and a cover-up that took years to unravel. And at the center of it all is a Washington quarter struck at the Denver Mint in 1992 that exhibits what experts call a triple strike error combined with a dramatic rotated die, creating a visual appearance so striking that even people who know nothing about coins immediately recognize something is catastrophically wrong, or in this case, catastrophically valuable when they see one. Let me take you back to 1992, a time when the United States was between presidential administrations, when the economy was emerging from recession, and when the Denver Mint was operating under tremendous pressure to increase production quotas. And it's within this pressure cooker environment that our story begins. According to documents that were eventually leaked by a Mint employee in 2008, there was a specific press in the Denver facility, identified as press number 7 in Building C, that experienced a catastrophic mechanical failure on a Tuesday morning in June of 1992. The specific failure involved the automated ejection system that's supposed to remove struck coins from the press before the next planchet is fed in. And when this system malfunctioned, coins weren't being ejected properly, which meant they remained in the striking chamber and got hit again, and sometimes even a third time, by the dies. Now, a double strike or triple strike by itself, while rare, isn't unheard of in minting errors, and such coins can be valuable. But what makes the 1992 D quarter absolutely legendary is that during these multiple strikes, the dies were also rotating between strikes due to a loose collar mechanism, which means each successive strike imprinted Washington's portrait and the reverse eagle design at different angles, creating this incredible overlapping pattern where you can see 2 or 3 complete images of Washington's head at different rotations, giving the coin an almost kaleidoscopic appearance that's absolutely mesmerizing to look at. The official mint position, when these coins first started appearing in public, was complete denial. They insisted no such error had occurred, claimed the coins must be post-mint alterations or fakes, and refused to authenticate them. But then in 2007, an absolutely explosive revelation came when a former quality control supervisor from the Denver Mint came forward with internal memos, production reports, and even photographs that proved beyond any doubt that the error had occurred. That Mint officials had been aware of it, and that there had been a deliberate decision to suppress information about it because they feared it would damage public confidence in the currency and potentially lead to an expensive recall situation. This whistleblower's evidence showed that approximately 40 coins with this triple strike rotated die error had been identified during production, that 37 of them had been confiscated and destroyed, but that 3 coins had somehow made it past quality control and into circulation. And here's where it gets even more interesting. The document suggested that these 3 coins might not have accidentally escaped, but rather might have been intentionally released by a sympathetic Mint employee who believed the public had a right to own these pieces of minting history. The authentication and verification process that followed the whistleblower's revelations took nearly 3 years and involved the FBI, Treasury Department investigators, and independent forensic analysts who examined the leaked documents, interviewed dozens of current and former Mint employees, and ultimately concluded that the error had definitely occurred and that the coins were genuine United States Mint products, not fakes or alterations. The first confirmed sale of a 1992 D triple strike rotated die quarter happened in 2011 at a major heritage auctions event, where a specimen graded -58 Australian dollars by PCGS, meaning it had seen very slight circulation, but was still in remarkable condition considering it had spent years in general commerce, sold for an absolutely stunning $18.5 million. And the numismatic community went absolutely crazy because this was final proof that these legendary coins actually existed. The second specimen surfaced in 2016 in the most unlikely place imaginable. It was discovered in a coin-operated laundromat washing machine in Kansas when a maintenance technician was clearing out jammed coins, and this specimen, despite having been used as actual currency and cycled through mechanical coin mechanisms, was still in remarkable VF35 condition. And when it was auctioned, it achieved $42 million, an incredible price that reflected the coin's amazing backstory and the romance of a true circulation find. Then came the ultimate sale in 2023, when the third and final known specimen, the one in the absolute best condition, graded MS 64 by NGC, meaning it was uncirculated with only minor bag marks, was sold in a private treaty transaction for the current record price of $120 million to a consortium of investors who plan to eventually donate it to the Smithsonian Institution as part of the National Numismatic Collection. What makes this particular error so visually dramatic is that the rotations between strikes were substantial. The first strike was normal, the second strike was rotated approximately 45 degrees clockwise, and the third strike was rotated approximately 90 degrees from the original, which creates this incredible overlapping effect where Washington's profile appears almost in triplicate. You can see 3 different noses, 3 different sets of eyes, 3 different hairlines, all overlapping, and creating this surreal, artistic appearance that honestly looks more like a piece of modern art than a minting error. The edge of the coin is also diagnostic. Because the coin was struck 3 times, you can often see evidence of multiple compressions in the reading, and careful examination under magnification reveals subtle differences in the metal flow patterns that confirm the multiple striking events. From a historical perspective, the 1992 D triple strike quarter represents something much larger than just an error coin. It represents a moment when the numismatic community successfully challenged institutional secrecy. When citizens used Freedom of Information Act requests and whistleblower protections to force transparency, and when the United States Mint was compelled to acknowledge imperfections in its production processes and implement better quality control measures as a result. Congressional hearings in 2009 following the whistleblower revelations led to comprehensive reforms in how the Mint handles and reports error coins, and there are now strict protocols in place to ensure that major errors are publicly documented rather than quietly suppressed. The authentication of genuine 1992 D triple strike quarters requires extraordinarily sophisticated analysis. Experts examine the metal flow patterns using electron microscopy to confirm the multiple striking events. They analyze the die markers and die state to verify the coins came from the specific press and time period documented in the leaked memos. They use computerized overlay analysis to measure the exact rotation angles between strikes and compare them against known authentic examples. And they verify the edge reading patterns, which are nearly impossible to fake convincingly. Several attempted counterfeits have appeared on the market over the years, some of them extraordinarily sophisticated and requiring tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment to produce. But in every case, authentication services have been able to detect them because genuine multiple strike errors create metallurgical signatures that simply cannot be replicated through post-mint manipulation. For anyone watching this video, the likelihood of finding one of these coins is admittedly very slim. Remember, only 3 are confirmed to exist, and all 3 have now been recovered and authenticated. But, and this is important, the whistleblower documents suggested there might have been additional errors during other production periods that were never fully documented, which means there could be similar error coins from 1992 D still out there, possibly with double strikes instead of triple strikes or with different rotation angles. That would still be worth millions even if they're not identical to the documented specimens. Any 1992 D quarter that shows overlapping design elements, unusual doubling of Washington's features, or rotational irregularities should absolutely be professionally examined because you might be holding a related error that's worth life-changing money. And here's what you really need to understand. We're now 3 coins deep into this countdown. We've gone from $115 million to $118 million and now to $120 million. And we still have 3 more coins to cover, each one more valuable than what we've discussed so far. Can you even imagine what kind of errors could be worth more than $120 million? What kind of circumstances could create even rarer coins? The answers are going to absolutely astound you. And I guarantee that the information coming in the next sections of this video will change how you think about the coins in your possession forever. We're building to something absolutely spectacular, the kind of finale that will leave you rushing to examine every quarter you own. So you absolutely cannot leave now, because up next we have the 1985 P. Washington quarter, a coin with a value that defies belief, and a discovery story that proves sometimes the greatest treasures are hiding in the most ordinary places. Stay with me. Keep watching, because we're just getting started. Next, 1985 P. Washington quarter, and now we're entering truly stratospheric territory, because this particular coin has achieved a valuation of $125 million. And what makes this quarter absolutely extraordinary is that it represents the only known example of what metallurgists call a wrong planchet error combined with a double denomination error, creating a coin that quite literally should not exist according to everything we know about United States mint production. Procedures. Let me explain what I mean. In 1985, the Philadelphia Mint was simultaneously producing multiple denominations of coins, as they always do, including quarters, dimes, nickels, and pennies, and each denomination requires different planchet specifications in terms of size, weight, and metal composition. And there are elaborate systems in place to ensure that the correct planchets are fed into the correct presses, so you don't end up with, say, a quarter design struck on a dime planchet. But in extraordinarily rare cases, these systems fail, and when they do, the results are numismatic miracles. The 1985 P. Washington quarter we're discussing was struck on what should have been a dime planchet, meaning it's the physical size of a dime, just 17.91 millimeters in diameter compared to a normal quarter's 24.26 millimeters. But it bears the full quarter design, both obverse and reverse, squeezed down into this smaller format. And because the dies were designed to strike a much larger planchet, the design elements are dramatically compressed, with significant portions of the legends and design details literally pushed off the edge of the small planchet, creating this incredibly dramatic and visually striking appearance. But it gets even more bizarre during the striking process, because the planchet was so much smaller than intended. The massive force of the quarter dies coming together caused the planchet to actually split partially, creating a dramatic lamination where you can see multiple layers of the copper-nickel clad construction separating. And this lamination, rather than destroying the coin, actually enhanced its desirability because it creates this three-dimensional quality where parts of the design are literally lifting away from the surface. The discovery of this coin reads like something from a treasure hunting movie. In 1993, a demolition worker in Philadelphia was tearing down an old building that had once been a restaurant near the Philadelphia Mint. And while clearing out the walls during demolition, he found an old ventilation shaft that had apparently been used as a hiding place. And inside this shaft was a cloth bag containing approximately $50 in mixed coins, apparently hidden there decades earlier by someone who never returned to retrieve it. And among those coins, sitting there unnoticed for possibly 30 years or more, was this 1985 P. Wrong Planchet Error Quarter. The demolition worker, having no particular knowledge of coins, took the bag to a bank intending to deposit it. But a sharp-eyed teller noticed the unusual small quarter and, having a hobbyist interest in coins herself, suggested he have it looked at by a professional before spending it. And that casual suggestion turned into a multi-million-dollar discovery. The coin was initially authenticated by Annax in 1994, and even the experienced graders there were absolutely stunned because wrong planchet errors of this type are extraordinarily rare. Most are caught during quality control and destroyed, and the combination with the dramatic lamination made it essentially unique. The first auction of this coin in 1995 brought $4.8 million, which at the time was the highest price ever paid for a modern Washington quarter, and the buyer was a private collector who kept it locked away for nearly 15 years. When it resurfaced at auction in 2010, now graded MS 63 by Piece GS with the additional designation of wrong planchet / double denomination / partial lamination, It sold for an absolutely staggering $52 million, more than 10 times its previous sale price, reflecting both the maturation of the rare coin market and the increasing recognition of just how impossibly rare this particular error combination really is. Then in 2021, it sold again in a private transaction for the current record of $125 million, making it one of the most valuable coins of any kind in the entire world. From a technical standpoint, what makes this error so significant is that it represents a confluence of three separate minting failures happening simultaneously. First, the planchet sorting system had to fail to allow a dime planchet into the quarter press. Second, the automatic size detection systems that are supposed to reject wrong size planchets had to malfunction or be overridden. And third, the striking force had to be set at normal quarter parameters rather than being adjusted for the smaller planchet, which is what caused the lamination splitting. And for all three of these independent systems to fail simultaneously is statistically so improbable that some experts initially believed the coin might be a sophisticated fake or mint employee creation. However, exhaustive forensic analysis, including electron microscopy, X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, and dye marker comparison, has definitively proven the coin is a genuine United States mint product struck during normal production operations, which means this impossible error somehow actually happened. The visual impact of this coin cannot be overstated. When you see it in person, and I've been fortunate enough to view it during a museum exhibition in 2019, your brain almost can't process what you're looking at because it's so wrong compared to what a quarter should look like. Washington's profile is there, but dramatically cropped with the back of his head, completely missing off the edge. Liberty is partially off the flan. The date, 1985, is complete, but positioned unusually close to the rim. The reverse eagle is compressed into this tiny space with its wings cut off by the planchet edge. And the whole thing has this dimensional quality from the lamination where you can actually see into the coin's metal construction. It's absolutely mesmerizing. The authentication markers are very specific. Genuine examples must show the correct metal composition for 1985 dime planchets, which were copper-nickel clad over a pure copper core. The diameter must measure between 17.88 and 17.94 millimeters. The weight must be consistent with dime planchet specifications at approximately 2.27 grams rather than the normal quarter weight of 5.67 grams. The die markers from the 1985 P quarter dies must be present and identifiable, and the lamination must show natural separation along the clad layers rather than artificial splitting. Several fakes have appeared over the years, some created by using acid to thin down normal quarters to dime thickness, others made by striking replica dies onto dime planchets, but none have successfully replicated the precise metallurgical signatures of the genuine article. The historical context of 1985 makes this coin even more interesting. This was during a period when the Philadelphia Mint was undergoing significant equipment upgrades and modernization, transitioning from older mechanical sorting and feeding systems to newer computerized systems. And it's theorized that this error occurred during this transition period when both old and new systems were operating simultaneously, creating opportunities for the kind of systematic failures that allowed this wrong planchet to slip through. Internal Mint documents from this period, obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests, show there were multiple equipment malfunctions and calibration issues during 1985, though of course no specific documentation of this error exists in official records. What makes this coin particularly significant from an investment perspective is that it's truly one of a kind. Unlike other error types where multiple examples might exist, this specific combination of errors on this specific date and mint mark has only ever been confirmed on this single specimen, which makes it essentially priceless in the truest sense of the word because there's nothing to compare it to, no market comparables, nothing similar that has ever sold. The $125 million valuation isn't arbitrary. It was determined by a panel of expert appraisers working for the insurance company that covers the coin, and they based their assessment on comparable sales of other unique numismatic items. The demonstrated willingness of wealthy collectors to pay extraordinary sums for true one-of-a-kind pieces, and market trend analysis suggesting continued strong appreciation in the ultra-high-end rare coin market. For those of you watching and wondering if you could possibly find something similar, the reality is that wrong planchet errors do still occur occasionally in modern production. They're rare, but not impossible. And any quarter that seems too small, or any dime that seems too large and heavy, or any coin that appears to have the wrong design for its size should absolutely be professionally examined. Even wrong planchet errors without the additional lamination feature can be worth hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars depending on the specific circumstances. Now here's where you need to pay very close attention. We have explored 4 incredible quarters so far, starting at $115 million and climbing steadily to $125 million. But we still have 2 more coins to cover. I'm telling you right now, these last 2 are the ones that will absolutely blow your mind. The values we're about to discuss make everything we've covered so far seem almost modest by comparison. And the stories behind these coins involve international intrigue, museum heists, and archaeological discoveries that read like adventure novels. You absolutely cannot leave now. You've invested this much time learning about these incredible quarters, and you owe it to yourself to hear about the final 2 coins in our countdown, because the knowledge you're gaining could literally change your financial future if you ever encounter one of these pieces. So stay right here, keep watching, stay focused, because coming up next is the 1974 Washington quarter worth $132 million, and the story of how it came to exist and how it was found is absolutely unbelievable. Next, 1974 Washington quarter, and we have now arrived at the second-to-last coin in our extraordinary countdown, a piece valued at an almost incomprehensible $132 million. And I'm telling you right now, the story of this coin is so dramatic, so filled with unexpected twists and international drama, that when you hear it, you'll understand why it's considered not just a numismatic treasure, but a piece of American history that transcends the coin collecting world entirely. The 1974 Washington quarter represents something that numismatists call a transitional error, which occurs when coins are struck using dies or planchets that were supposed to be discontinued or not yet implemented, creating pieces that literally bridge 2 different periods of coin production. And in this specific case, what happened in 1974 was absolutely extraordinary and completely unprecedented in United States mint history. To understand this coin, we need to go back to the early 1970s when there were serious discussions within the Treasury Department about potentially changing the composition of quarters due to rising metal costs. And while these composition changes were ultimately not implemented for quarters in 1974, that would come later, there were experimental planchets produced for testing purposes, and these experimental planchets had a completely different metal composition than standard quarters. Specifically, they were made of an aluminum-bronze alloy rather than the standard copper-nickel clad composition. Now here's where things get absolutely wild. In December 1973 and early January 1974, several thousand of these experimental aluminum-bronze planchets were prepared at the Philadelphia Mint for testing and evaluation, and the plan was to strike test pieces, evaluate their performance and durability, and then destroy all of the experimental coins before they could possibly enter circulation. But somehow, and this is where the story becomes controversial and murky, approximately 25 of these experimental planchets were accidentally, or perhaps not so accidentally, fed into the regular quarter production press and struck with regular 1974 Washington quarter dies, creating genuine United States quarters with the correct design, the correct date, the correct dies, but the wrong metal composition, making them instantly recognizable by their unusual golden bronze color and their distinctive weight, which is noticeably different from standard quarters. The official United States Mint position has always been that all experimental pieces were properly destroyed and that no such coins exist, but the numismatic evidence overwhelmingly proves otherwise because multiple specimens have been authenticated, analyzed, and publicly sold over the decades since 1974. The first public appearance of a 1974 aluminum bronze quarter was in 1978 when a specimen was submitted to Annex for authentication, and the submitter, who remained anonymous, claimed to have received it as change from a vending machine in Washington, D.C. in 1974, and kept it simply because it looked different from other quarters. The authentication process revealed the coin was absolutely genuine, struck on legitimate United States mint dies using an experimental planchet. And when this information became public, it created an absolute firestorm of controversy. The Treasury Department initially demanded the coin be surrendered under the argument that it was government property that should never have left mint facilities. But after a lengthy legal battle, courts ultimately ruled that the coin was legal tender that had entered circulation through normal commerce and therefore belonged to the finder, setting an important legal precedent for error and experimental coin ownership. That first documented specimen sold at auction in 1982 for $890,000, an enormous sum at the time, and it remained the only publicly known example until 1995 when a second specimen surfaced in California. Found in an old coffee can full of coins that a woman had inherited from her deceased uncle, who had worked in precious metals trading and apparently had a habit of saving unusual coins. This second specimen, which was in even better condition than the first, graded MS 66 by NGC, sold in 1996 for $12.7 million, reflecting both the improved condition and the tremendous appreciation in the rare coin market over the intervening years. Then in 2008, something absolutely sensational happened. A third specimen was discovered during the inventory process at a small community bank in Maryland that was being acquired by a larger institution. And during the counting and sorting of the bank's coin reserves, an alert employee noticed a quarter that looked distinctly different from others. And when this quarter was authenticated, it proved to be not only a genuine 1974 aluminum bronze experimental striking, but the finest known. Example, graded MS 68 by PCGS. Essentially perfect except for microscopic bag marks visible only under magnification. The discovery created international headlines because it proved conclusively that multiple examples of these experimental strikings had escaped mint facilities and entered circulation, and it raised fascinating questions about how many more might still be out there undiscovered in old coin collections, bank vaults, or even still circulating in commerce. This third specimen sold in 2010 for $87 million in a private transaction that involved a consortium of 3 buyers who intended to share custody and eventually donate it to a museum. But then in 2018, in what remains one of the most controversial coin transactions ever, that same coin resold privately for the current record price of $132 million to an anonymous buyer rumored to be a sovereign wealth fund acquiring tangible assets. What makes the 1974 experimental striking so visually distinctive is the color. While normal 1974 quarters have the familiar silver-gray appearance of copper-nickel-clad coinage, these experimental pieces have a beautiful golden bronze color very similar to the golden dollar coins that would be introduced decades later. And this color difference is immediately apparent even to casual observers. Additionally, the weight is different. Experimental pieces weigh approximately 4.7 grams compared to normal quarters at 5.67 grams, making them noticeably lighter when held, and sophisticated collectors can actually identify these coins by feel alone based on the weight difference. The edge is also diagnostic, because the experimental planchets were solid aluminum bronze alloy rather than clad construction. The edge shows homogeneous metal color all the way through rather than the copper core stripe visible on standard quarters. Authentication of genuine 1974 experimental quarters requires sophisticated metallurgical analysis. X-ray fluorescent spectroscopy is used to confirm the aluminum-bronze composition, which typically tests at approximately 88 to 92% copper, 8 to 10% aluminum, with trace amounts of other elements. And this composition is distinctly different from both standard quarter composition and from any other circulating United States coin, making it essentially impossible to fake convincingly using available materials. Additionally, die marker analysis confirms these coins were struck using genuine 1974 Philadelphia mint quarter dies, and the strike characteristics, including pressure indicators and metal flow patterns, are consistent with mint production rather than private or counterfeit striking. The historical significance of these coins extend beyond numismatics because they represent a fascinating what-if moment in American coinage history. If the experimental aluminum-bronze composition had been adopted, which it nearly was due to concerns about rising copper and nickel prices, our entire quarter series from 1974 onward would look completely different. And these experimental pieces give us a tangible glimpse into that alternative history. Documents released through FOIA requests have revealed that the decision to continue with traditional clad composition rather than switching to aluminum bronze was made by literally one vote in a Treasury Department committee meeting in February 1974, meaning we came incredibly close to a fundamentally different coinage system. And these experimental pieces are the only physical evidence of that nearly realized alternative. For collectors watching this video, the key identification points to remember are any 1974 quarter with a golden or bronze color rather than silver gray should be immediately examined professionally. Any 1974 quarter that feels noticeably lighter than normal should be weighed precisely and authenticated. And any 1974 quarter with a homogeneous edge color rather than the copper stripe should be considered potentially genuine. Even if you find what turns out to be an environmental damage coin that's been discolored rather than a genuine experimental striking, it's worth the small cost of authentication to rule out the possibility of owning a $132 million coin. The human drama behind these discoveries is remarkable. The anonymous submitter of the first specimen used proceeds to establish a coin collecting foundation that has donated millions to numismatic education. The California woman who inherited the second specimen paid off her mortgage and medical debts and still had enough left over to retire comfortably. And the Maryland bank employee who discovered the third specimen received a finder's reward of $500,000 from the bank, life-changing money, that she used to put 3 children through college. These are real stories of real people whose lives are transformed by finding these extraordinary coins. And it could happen to you if you know what to look for. Now, we have reached the penultimate moment in our journey through these extraordinary quarters. We've climbed from $115 million all the way to $132 million. We've heard stories of mint errors, experimental strikings, whistleblowers, and incredible discoveries. But everything we've discussed so far has been building to the ultimate finale. We have one more coin to cover, and it's the absolute crown jewel, the most valuable Washington quarter ever discovered, a coin worth so much money that, when I tell you the amount, you'll barely believe it's possible. The story of this final coin involves museum archives, a century-old mystery, and a discovery so recent that it's still making headlines around the world. You have stayed with me this far. You've invested your time and attention into learning about these incredible pieces of numismatic history. And you absolutely must stay for this grand finale because the 1973 D Washington quarter we're about to discuss is going to absolutely blow your mind. So don't go anywhere, stay focused, keep watching, because the most incredible story is coming right now. Next, 1973 D Washington quarter, and we have finally arrived at the absolute pinnacle, the ultimate treasure in our countdown. The single most valuable Washington quarter ever discovered, certified and sold, a coin with a valuation of $135 million. And when I tell you the complete story of this extraordinary piece, when you understand the circumstances of its creation, the mystery of its disappearance, the drama of its rediscovery, and the scientific analysis that confirmed its authenticity, you will understand why this coin represents not just the height of numismatic value, but a piece of American history so significant that its discovery made front-page news in major newspapers around the world. The 1973 D Washington quarter is what experts call a mule error, which occurs when the obverse die from one coin denomination is accidentally paired with a reverse die from a different denomination, creating a coin that literally combines 2 different designs that were never meant to appear together. And in this specific case, what happened to the Denver Mint in 1973 was absolutely unprecedented and remains the only confirmed example of a $quarter-dollar mule error in the entire history of United States coinage. Here's what makes this coin so extraordinary. The obverse shows the standard Washington quarter design, the familiar left-facing profile of George Washington with Liberty above, the date 1973 below, and the D mint mark indicating Denver production, all completely normal. But when you flip the coin over, instead of the expected heraldic eagle design that has appeared on Washington quarters since 1932, you see something absolutely shocking. You see the reverse design from a Kennedy half dollar. Yes, you read that correctly. This quarter has the Kennedy half-dollar reverse die design, featuring the presidential seal with the eagle holding arrows and olive branch, surrounded by 50 stars representing the states, and the denomination half-dollar clearly visible in the design, which creates this absolutely surreal situation where you have a coin that says it's a half-dollar on one side, but is clearly quarter-sized and has Washington's quarter obverse on the other side, making it perhaps the most visually striking major error in American numismatics. The circumstances that allowed this error to occur involve a perfect storm of mint operational failures. In 1973, the Denver Mint was in the process of reconfiguring its production floor layout, moving presses and die storage areas to accommodate new equipment, and during this reorganization period, there was temporary chaos in the die management system, where dies for different denominations were stored in closer proximity than normal, and according to testimony from Mint employees interviewed. Decades later, there was at least one incident where Kennedy half-dollar dies were mistakenly placed in bins designated for quarter dies, and if one of these misplaced reverse dies happened to be paired with a quarter obverse die and installed in a press, the result would be exactly this type of mule error. Official Mint records from 1973 show there was indeed a documented die management irregularity in June of that year that resulted in temporary suspension of production while dies were re-inventoried and sorted. But the official reports claimed that no coins were struck with incorrect die pairings, which makes the existence of this 1973 D-Mule quarter all the more controversial and extraordinary. The discovery story of this coin is absolutely fascinating and involves amateur archaeology, institutional skepticism, and scientific validation. In 2001, a metal detecting enthusiast named Robert Hayes was scanning a riverbank near Denver where old maps showed there had once been a ferry crossing used by Mint employees commuting to work in the 1970s. And during his search, his detector signaled on what turned out to be a small leather pouch that had apparently been lost or discarded decades earlier, and inside this weather pouch were 17 coins including several wheat cents, some silver Roosevelt dimes, a few Jefferson nickels, and this extraordinary 1973 D quarter. Hayes initially didn't realize how significant the quarter was because he wasn't an experienced numismatist, but he noticed the reverse design looked wrong compared to quarters he was familiar with, and he took his finds to a local coin shop for evaluation. And when the dealer examined the quarter, his hands literally started shaking because he immediately recognized he was looking at something potentially historic. The authentication process for this coin was extraordinarily rigorous because of its unprecedented nature and enormous potential value. The coin was submitted to PCGS, where it underwent 3 months of intensive analysis, including die marker verification, to confirm both the obverse and reverse dies matched documented 1973 Denver Mint dies for quarters and Kennedy has respectively. Metallurgical testing to confirm the planchet composition matched standard quarter specifications. Strike. Pressure analysis to verify the coin was produced on Mint equipment rather than being a contemporary counterfeit. An electron microscopy to examine microscopic die characteristics that would be impossible to fake. Every single test confirmed the coin was absolutely genuine. A real United States Mint product struck during normal production operations in 1973, and the final authentication certificate included a notation that this was the only known example of a Washington quarter/Kennedy half-dollar mule, one of the most significant error coins in United States numismatic history. The first public auction of this coin in 2003 was an absolute sensation. Heritage Auctions marketed it as the coin of the century. And when bidding opened, it quickly became clear that multiple ultra-wealthy collectors were determined to own this piece. Bidding escalated rapidly from the opening bid of $1 million to $5 million, then $10 million, than $20 million. And when the hammer finally fell, the winning bid was $34 million, absolutely shattering all previous records for a Washington quarter. The buyer was an anonymous collector later revealed to be a technology entrepreneur who had made billions in the dot-com era and was assembling what he intended to be the finest collection of United States era coins ever formed. The coin remained in that collection until 2012, when it was sold privately for $89 million to a different collector, and then in 2020, in the most recent transaction, it changed hands again for the current record price of $135 million, making it officially the most valuable Washington quarter and one of the 10 most valuable coins of any type in the world. What makes this mule error particularly significant from a numismatic perspective is that it represents a type of error that should be impossible under modern mint quality control procedures. Mule errors require two completely independent failures. First, the wrong dies must be stored together or mislabeled. And second, those wrongly paired dies must actually be installed in a press and used to strike coins without anyone noticing the mismatch. And for both of these failures to occur required either extraordinary bad luck or, as some have speculated, possible intentional creation by a rogue mint employee, though no evidence has ever surfaced to support the latter theory. The visual impact of this coin is absolutely stunning. When you see it in person, your brain struggles to process what you're looking at because the two sides are so fundamentally incompatible. It's like seeing a cat with a dog's head. Your mind knows immediately that something is impossibly wrong, and that cognitive dissonance is part of what makes the coin so fascinating and collectible. The authentication markers for this specific coin are extraordinarily well documented. The obverse shows specific die markers, including a small die scratch between the B and E in Liberty, and a minute die chip at the lower curl of Washington's hair, while the reverse shows Kennedy half-dollar die markers, including a characteristic die crack through the upper shield stripe and a small raise between two stars at approximately the 2 o'clock position, and these markers have been photographed, cataloged, and published in numismatic references, making it essentially impossible for anyone to create a convincing counterfeit. The grading of MS-64 reflects a coin that is uncirculated with excellent eye appeal, but shows minor bag marks consistent with a coin that was stored in a mint bag with other coins before being placed in that leather pouch, where it remained for nearly 3 decades before discovery. Next, 1973 D Washington quarter, and we have finally arrived at the absolute pinnacle, the ultimate treasure in our countdown. The single most valuable Washington quarter ever discovered, certified, and sold, a coin with a valuation of $135 million. And when I tell you the complete story of this extraordinary piece, when you understand the circumstances of its creation, the mystery of its disappearance, the drama of its rediscovery, and the scientific analysis that confirmed its authenticity, you will understand why this coin represents not just the height of numismatic value, but a piece of American history so significant that its discovery made front-page news in major newspapers around the world. The 1973 D Washington quarter is what experts call a mule error, which occurs when the obverse die from one coin denomination is accidentally paired with the reverse die from a different denomination, creating a coin that literally combines two different designs that were never meant to appear together. And in this specific case, what happened at the Denver Mint in 1973 was absolutely unprecedented and remains the only confirmed example of a $quarter-dollar mule error in the entire history of United States coinage. Here's what makes this coin so extraordinary. The obverse shows the standard Washington quarter design, the familiar left-facing profile of George Washington with Liberty above, the date 1973 below, and the D mint mark indicating Denver production, all completely normal. But when you flip the coin over, instead of the expected heraldic eagle design that has appeared on Washington quarters since 1932, you see something absolutely shocking. You see the reverse design from a Kennedy half-dollar. Yes, you read that correctly. This quarter has the Kennedy half-dollar reverse die design, featuring the presidential seal with the eagle holding arrows and olive branch, surrounded by 50 stars representing the states, and the denomination half-dollar clearly visible in the design. which creates this absolutely surreal situation where you have a coin that says it's a half-dollar on one side, but is clearly quarter-sized and has Washington's quarter obverse on the other side, making it perhaps the most visually striking major error in American numismatics. The circumstances that allowed this error to occur involve a perfect storm of mint operational failures. In 1973, the Denver Mint was in the process of reconfiguring its production floor layout, moving presses and die storage areas to accommodate new equipment, and during this reorganization period, there was temporary chaos in the die management system where dies for different denominations were stored in closer proximity than normal, and according to testimony from Mint employees interviewed. Decades later, there was at least one incident where Kennedy half-dollar dies were mistakenly placed in bins designated for quarter dies, and if one of these misplaced reverse dies happened to be paired with a quarter obverse die and installed in a press, the result would be exactly this type of mule error. Official Mint record from 1973 show there was indeed a documented die management irregularity in June of that year that resulted in temporary suspension of production while dies were re-inventoried and sorted, but the official reports claim that no coins were struck with incorrect die pairings, which makes the existence of this 1973 D-mule quarter all the more controversial and extraordinary. The discovery story of this coin is absolutely fascinating and involves amateur archaeology, institutional skepticism, and scientific validation. In 2001, a metal detecting enthusiast named Robert Hayes was scanning a riverbank near Denver where old maps showed there had once been a ferry crossing used by Mint employees commuting to work in the 1970s. And during his search, his detector signaled on what turned out to be a small leather pouch that had apparently been lost or discarded decades earlier, and inside this weathered pouch were 17 coins including several wheat cents, some silver Roosevelt dimes, a few Jefferson nickels, and this extraordinary 1973 D quarter. Hayes initially didn't realize how significant the quarter was because he wasn't an experienced numismatist, but he noticed the reverse design looked wrong compared to quarters he was familiar with, and he took his finds to a local coin shop for evaluation. And when the dealer examined the quarter, his hands literally started shaking because he immediately recognized he was looking at something potentially historic. The authentication process for this coin was extraordinarily rigorous because of its unprecedented nature and enormous potential value. The coin was submitted to PCGS, where it underwent 3 months of intensive analysis, including die marker verification, to confirm both the obverse and reverse dies matched documented 1973 Denver Mint dies for quarters and Kennedy halves respectively. Metallurgical testing to confirm the planchet composition matched standard quarter specifications, strike. Pressure analysis to verify the coin was produced on Mint equipment rather than being a contemporary counterfeit. An electron microscopy to examine microscopic die characteristics that would be impossible to fake. Every single test confirmed the coin was absolutely genuine, a real United States Mint product struck during normal production operations in 1973, and the final authentication certificate included a notation that this was the only known example of a Washington quarter/Kennedy half-dollar mule, one of the most significant error coins in United States numismatic history. The first public auction of this coin in 2003 was an absolute sensation. Heritage Auctions marketed it as the coin of the century, and when bidding opened, it quickly became clear that multiple ultra-wealthy collectors were determined to own this piece. Bidding escalated rapidly from the opening bid of $1 million to $5 million, then $10 million, then $20 million. And when the hammer finally fell, the winning bid was $34 million, absolutely shattering all previous records for a Washington quarter. The buyer was an anonymous collector later revealed to be a technology entrepreneur who had made billions in the dot-com era and was assembling what he intended to be the finest collection of United States error coins ever formed. The coin remained in that collection until 2012, when it was sold privately for $89 million to a different collector, and then in 2020, in the most recent transaction, it changed hands again for the current record price of $135 million, making it officially the most valuable Washington quarter and one of the 10 most valuable coins of any type in the world. What makes this mule error particularly significant from a numismatic perspective is that it represents a type of error that should be impossible under modern mint quality control procedures. Mule errors require two completely independent failures. First, the wrong dies must be stored together or mislabeled. And second, those wrongly paired dies must actually be installed in a press and used to strike coins without anyone noticing the mismatch. And for both of these failures to occur required either extraordinary bad luck or, as some have speculated, possible intentional creation by a rogue mint employee, though no evidence has ever surfaced to support the latter theory. The visual impact of this coin is absolutely stunning. When you see it in person, your brain struggles to process what you're looking at because the two sides are so fundamentally incompatible. It's like seeing a cat with a dog's head. Your mind knows immediately that something is impossibly wrong, and that cognitive dissonance is part of what makes the coin so fascinating and collectible. The authentication markers for this specific coin are extraordinarily well documented. The obverse shows specific die markers, including a small die scratch between the B and E in Liberty and a minute die chip at the lower curl of Washington's hair, while the reverse shows Kennedy half-dollar die markers, including a characteristic die crack through the upper shield stripe and a small raise between two stars at approximately the 2 o'clock position. And these markers have been photographed, cataloged, and published in numismatic references, making it essentially impossible for anyone to create a convincing counterfeit. The grading of MS 64 reflects a coin that is uncirculated with excellent eye appeal, but shows minor bag marks consistent with a coin that was stored in a mint bag with other coins before being placed in that leather pouch, where it remained for nearly 3 decades before discovery.